Alright everybody, we've got our pothead puppet ready to go, but there's only one problem. And we'll take care of that right now in part 5, his costuming and accessories.
So I'm starting off by opening up the clothing template that I have for SVG files from a different puppet. And I'm going to modify the pants a little bit. And then this is a pattern for a vest that I downloaded. And I've used this vest for a different character, but it's very formal. And I think I'd prefer that Pothead have more of a kind of a motorcycle punk vest. So I just need to kind of make a few changes. And once the SVG files have been updated, I'm going to copy them and flip them left to right, and that'll make both sides. And then this is a little trick I've got to make sure that everything is the right size. I've already measured it, but the Glowforge will take a photograph, and I just put the puppet in the bed, and then I'm able to kind of size the pieces on them and double check that they are dry fitted correctly, if you will, and then be able to remove the puppet and put down material. And now that I'm positive they're the right size, just how to fit them onto the material. This process takes a little while. It's a little bit of juggling to try and see the best way that you can get stuff on the material, but once it's there and it gets cut, it goes pretty quickly. I'm using the cardboard setting, and the material that I'm cutting into is some kind of fake leather. One side it's just felt, but on the other side, which is the top side we're looking at right here, it's kind of got some fake plasticky material, and the Glowforge cuts it really smoothly. I also am going to use this same fake leather plastic to make some boots, combat boots for the pothead. After the boots, I'm going to use some MDF, and I am going to print out the soles of the boots. And that's in two parts. One piece that is going to glue onto the fake leather or the uppers of the boot, and then the bottom, which is the sole with the etched rendition of the bottoms, the pattern that it would leave in the dirt. So this is a good example of the Glowforge's capability. We just watched it etch, and now it's doing a cut, and then lastly it's doing a score. And those are the three modes that it, or strengths that it fires its laser. For the pants, I'm using some black denim that I've recycled from an old pair of black jeans. And again, just being very careful about how I align the pattern to the fabric. And on the same cardboard settings, it'll cut through that fabric really nicely and easily. We need two of those, the front and the back. It's really hard to see the fabric on the Glowforge's camera, so I had to make sure that I lined it up correctly there. And I did use this blue tape. The blue tape that's holding the fabric down was ironically the best way to see where I was positioning the pattern. I couldn't find an easy pattern that I wanted to use for a t-shirt, so I just made my own. A couple of shapes, and then fit it to the vest. And I'm gonna cut the two front and back pieces of the t-shirt out of some old white t-shirt material. And then the other side. Now we just have to sew everything together. Back of the vest, two halves. And then the left side and right side of the front of the vest. Top over the shoulder. Now I'm going to hem the top of the pants at the waistline. And the other side. Face to face, and then sewing the front to the back of the pants. Now we're going to assemble the tongue to the uppers of the combat boots, right and left. And the two halves of the back of the combat boots. Right and left. the front and back of the t-shirt. Now that we have all the clothes ready for our puppet, I'm going to cut a small length of chain with a ring on either end, and I'm going to connect that to the front and back, the top of his pants, as if he's got a Pachuco chain. I thought about actually chaining a wallet to the other end, but one thing at a time. That'll be in the special edition. Next, I'm going to sew the backs to the uppers on his combat boots. And I do this by hand because the face to face, the way that it lines up is kind of inverted. On the toe of the uppers, it curves one way, but the backs curve the opposite way. And it's just easier for me and my brain to align it when I'm sewing by hand rather than try and shift something this small as I'm sewing it on the machine. And I think that's just the nature of making a 3D shape out of some 2D shapes. That's the right boot. And then we'll do the left one. Once we have the toes and backs assembled into uppers, I'm going to use a little bit of super glue and very carefully glue along the soles. The side of the material that I'm applying the glue to is a felt side, so it does glue almost instantaneously and holds very well. So now this first layer has kind of become the insole of the shoe. Apply some wood glue to the bottoms, glue them in place. Now I'm going to use some window flashing. This is the exact same kind of flashing to tuck in your screen to the window frame that I had used for the fingers on the puppet, only the gauge is slightly larger. And I'm just going to super glue that around the edge of the boot to make a little bit of a border around the sole. Once everything is glued into place, I'll come back with a little bit of black touch-up paint and paint the bottoms of the soles and any other spots where you can still see a little bit of MDF or the border between the rubbers and the uppers. I also kind of wanted to distress his pants at the knees a little and give him some artistic rips in his designer jeans. So I used my Dremel to shred the kneecaps a little. Now, speaking of painting, I'm going to take all of his clothes back off so that I can give the entire body a little bit of a once-over with some just pewter gray, flat acrylic paint to make everything look a little more uniform underneath the clothes. I wasn't super meticulous about this process, but I did do 2 or 3 coats, just generally. I figured this is the kind of thing that maybe somebody might like to do to customize their puppet. Paint it any color you want. Gray is basically just a primer. Once everything has a fairly even coat of paint, I went ahead and decorated his t-shirt with an anarchy symbol. And then I went ahead and started in on his motorcycle vest, putting some little silver paint dabs to represent a zipper. And I went ahead and gave him some teeth with white paint. I did a lot of other little embellishments. If you notice, I made him some leather spiked bracelets, and I put a button on his vest. Once I got his clothing, I was happy with it. Get him dressed again. And that is one punk rock pothead.